Hey there, my name's Drew Brashler, and in this video, I'm starting a brand new series on monitor engineering. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to get your Behringer X32 set up for a monitor engineer on this console mixing for a band either with floor wedges or in-ears. If you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident in your production gear no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, I have my Behringer X32 here, and if I'm going to be mixing on in-ears, I want to be having my in-ears plugged in to the back of the console in the control room out. Now, why is that? Well, the benefit of this section of the console is that if I go and solo up an instrument, it will solo it on that output. But any of the rest of the outputs are continuing to go through. Now, the other benefit of having it there is I also have a monitor level adjustment right here. So this can be my overall volume of my in-ears on this console. Now, what happens if you have that monitor, that in-ear transmitter, over in a rack next to the rest of you musicians' in-ears? Well, if you're using the XLR outputs on the back of the board, what we can do is we can specify to be coming from our monitor out left and right. So, for instance, if we go to our routing and we go all the way over to our XLR out, and say we had our outputs for our monitor on 13 and 14, well, what I can do is I can go down to monitor, and I can go ahead and select monitor left and monitor right. And so now I have monitor left and monitor right selected on these, and now I will plug in that in-ear transmitter into that. If I'm using a floor wedge, additionally, I will end up sending out one of my left-rights. And then if I go to my view section on here, I will make sure that mono is highlighted. On the full-size X32, we have this mono button as well. And what that will do is if I go solo up a stereo channel, it will sum them to mono because I have a mono floor wedge. And again, this monitor level adjustment is there for me to turn up and down that floor wedge on that monitor. Now I'm going to be setting up this X32 for feeding in-ears that I'm mixing for the band. So what I want to do is I want to link bus 1 and 2 together so that they are a stereo pair. So I can go and hit bus master on the bottom set of my left fader bank, and then I can go select one of my mix buses, and I can press view on the configuration and preamp section and just press link, and then I will confirm. And then I will then go to bus 3 and 4, and I will link those. Now, one thing to note about linking, I can link an odd with an even. I cannot link an even with an odd, meaning I cannot link bus 2 and 3 together. I can only link bus 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 together. So as you're linking these buses, just keep that in mind. So I have my in-ears set here. So mix bus 1 and 2 are linked, bus 3 and 4 are linked, bus 5 and 6 are linked, 7 and 8 are linked, 9 and 10 are linked. So the next thing that I want to do is go name these. So I'm going to go and select my mix bus 1, and I am going to press setup, go over to name and icon, and I am going to title this. So I'm going to press edit, and I'm going to clear this out and go IEM. Perfect. And so then I'm going to do the same thing on this channel. So this will be, again, IEM1. And as we can see, our suggestion is right here. So now I can go and press IEM1. And then I can go to my mix bus 3, and this is going to be IEM2. So now I can go IEM, and it's listed right here in our suggestions. So I'm just going to go over, select that. And I will then title this number 2. Okay, and then I will do the same thing for mix bus 4, is IEM2. And then this will be IEM3. Once I have named these, I'm going to change the way they are colored. So I'm going to make these green, and I'm going to invert every other. And that makes it so that I can look and see which pairs are paired together. After I've done that, I'm going to turn these up to 0. The reason being is because I want to be sending a unity gain level out to the transmitter. The next thing that I would do here is I would generate noise out of my oscillator, and I would send that to that in-ear transmitter. And I would make sure that as I'm sending out this and I turn it up and get close to peaking, that I'm not clipping the transmitter. And so what I want to do is I want to find out where my clip point is on my console and set the in-ear transmitter to be that same clip point. So I'm going to dial up this tone generator up to the point where I am happy with the level, in which case I'm going to be sitting right here, and I can either use pink noise or I can use the tone. And I'm going to level this out until I get to that -2 point. So this is going to give me still an additional 2 dB of headroom before I'm clipping on my console. What I'll then do is I will go adjust my transmitter to have this be just under the clipping point. Once I've done that, the next thing that I want to do is I want to set my EQ adjustments on my Mixbusses for sending out to this transmitter. Now, in a future video, I'm going to be talking about pilot tone issues at the 19 kilohertz. But one thing that I want to mention right now is that the in-ear transmitters that are wireless are limited in their frequency response. Most of the in-ear transmitters go all the way down to about 35 to 40 hertz and all the way up to 15 kilohertz. I know that's a little bit surprising that it doesn't go past 15 kilohertz, but that is actually due to the way that the RF is sent from that wireless transmitter. And I have right here the audio frequency response of in-ears. So these are some of the popular in-ears out there. Shure PSM 1000, 35 hertz to 15 kilohertz. PSM 900, same thing. PSM 700, 50 to 15 kilohertz. PSM 300, 38 to 15. And then we have our Sennheiser in-ears. So the G4 and the G3 are both matching at 25 hertz up to 15 kilohertz. Now again, this is due to the way that multiplexed audio is sent in wireless. And so when I am setting my EQ curve on my Mixbus, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a low cut on each of these Mixbusses. So I'm going to set my low cut at 40 hertz, and then on my high band, I'm going to set a high cut at 15 kilohertz. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my high 2 band. I'm going to make it a very narrow Q. I'm going to go all the way up to 19 kilohertz, and I'm going to cut this out all the way. Now, by doing this EQ curve, you are giving your musician the best possible mix in their wireless in-ears. If this is not a wireless in-ear, then I would not be applying this EQ curve. And in a future video, I'm going to be showing you what those pilot issues at the 19 kilohertz tone sound like. But trust me in knowing that this is the EQ curve that you'll want to have applied to any wireless transmitters that are in-ears out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this by pressing Utility, and I'm going to press Copy. And that way I can go to the rest of my Mixbusses, and I can paste them. So I can go to my in-ear 2, and I can go Utility, Paste, and then Confirm. And my in-ear 3, Paste, Confirm, 4, Paste, Confirm, 5, Paste, Confirm. So we can now see that all of my in-ears have this same EQ curve. The next thing that I like to do is I like to set a compressor in the Mixbus so that I make sure that I never clip the in-ear transmitters. One thing that's interesting about some of the in-ear transmitters out there is if that you clip that transmitter, it inadvertently turns the audio down on that pack. And I don't want to ever have that happen where I'm going and it's a mix and I accidentally clip that in-ear transmitter and I don't notice. I'm wanting to make sure that the musician's ears don't automatically start turning down. So what I do is I go and place a compressor with a 10-to-1 compression ratio, attack of 6, hold of 0, and a release of 68. This is a happy medium for me, knowing that if I start compressing into this, it will show on my meters here, And I will know that I'm going too loud into this in-ear transmitter, in which case I would have a conversation with the musician to have them turn up their pack, and then I would lower things in the mix for them. So what I'll then do is I will go place this at -8 dB. And so this is well underneath that -2 that I know is clipping the transmitter. When my meters were getting to -2 here, I remember that it was clipping my transmitter, so I set that to make it so that it wouldn't clip. So this is where I place this compressor. So what I'm then going to do is I'm going to copy and then paste this to the remaining channels. Now there's two ways that I can set up the X32 for monitor mixing. I can either set it up as a pre-fader send, or I can set it up as post-fader. So for pre-fader, what we can do is we can go and select a channel, and we can turn up the Mixbus sends, either by using the knobs, or we can do sends on fader and adjust it here. However, one thing that I like to do is I like to make it easier on myself when I'm monitor mixing. So I like to set it up as post-fader. Now, when I'm approaching post-fader, I will give myself a mix that I know sounds good. And then my mix buses are going to be trims off of that mix that I made for myself. Now, I know this sounds kind of weird, but if I can think of making myself a mix, and I know that my mix is always going to be similar every time I go mix. I always have a certain sound that I'm looking for when I'm mixing. And then if I notice that there's an instrument that's louder in my mix, and I didn't set it that way, and they're not in a solo, or if there's an instrument that's all of a sudden quieter, and obviously we didn't set it that way, then I can go adjust that volume up or down in my main mix, and that will apply for the rest of the mixes on my X32. Now, like I was saying, this is going to be a trim off of my mix. So for instance, if I had my main vocalist on in-ear 1, I'm going to know that they want their volume up higher than I would have it in my mix, because they need to overcome their head voice to be able to hear themselves in their in-ears. So let's go ahead and set up the board in a post-fader configuration. Now you can go and press Setup, and then go over to Config, and we can change our bus configurations here, and we can set them to be post-fader or pre-fader. In this case, I'm going to do it manually on each one of these mix buses to show you another way of doing it. So I can press Select on Mixbus 1, I can press View in the Configuration and Preamp section, and then I can go down and select Post Fader, and then I will confirm. Once you do this, it will wipe out any of the sends that were being previously sent to this mix bus. And because Mixbus 1 and 2 are linked, they are now set as Post Fader. Another thing to note about the X32 is even if bus 3 and 4, or 1 and 2, even if they're not linked, if you change the configuration, it will change it in both 1 and 2, 3 and 4. So just keep that in mind as you're setting up your pre-configuration on these bus sends. So I will go and select Mixbus 3, set this to Post Fader, confirm, Post Fader, Post Fader, and very lastly, our in-ear 5, which was already set to Post Fader. So as we can see, if I jump around on these different mix buses for my in-ear sends, we can see that all of them are Post Fader. And so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of paper. I love moleskin notebooks because they look professional. I'm going to grab a pen, and I am going to go and talk to every musician that's going to be out on stage. Now, this is beneficial if you meet them before they go on stage, and you get to get their name, what instrument they play, and then the next thing that you're going to ask them is, hey, what do you want in your mix? And chances are they're all going to say, I want an album sound in my mix. I want it to sound like a record, which is great. So they want a front of house mix. They want a full mix that sounds awesome. That's what they want in their in-ears. But they're also going to mention, hey, I want my click track panned to my right ear, or I want my click track panned to my left ear, or I want the snare far right and I want the click far left. And anything that they say, you're going to write down. And then when you take that back to your monitor console, you can start applying those things right away. So my default setup that I love to do is I love to press sends on fader and have my first mix bus here. And so we have all of my instruments. I have guitar 1, guitar 2, acoustic, bass, keys, tracks, and miscellaneous channels, vocal 1 through 4, and then here's all my drums, click track, MD talkback, and some host mics. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place all of these sends to be at -10. And -10 is going to be my baseline for all my in-ear channels. So I'm going to go and select Mixbus 1, and I'm going to set all of these to be at -10. I'll do the similar thing with Mixbus 2, in-ear 3, in-ear 4, so as we can see, if I go through all of my in-ear channels, all of my sends are at -10. And so now what I can do is I can go find those individual channels and I can go turn them up to the point where they are going to have them in their ears. One more thing that I end up doing is for the musicians that are on these in-ears, I will go set their send as pre-fader. And what's neat about the X32 is the pre-fader, post-fader can be set individually on every channel. So my Mixbus 1 and 2 are for my vocalist. So this in-ear 1 is going to be for my vocal 1. Now, to get this microphone above their head voice, you're going to have to go up either to the 0 or the +5 to get them loud enough in their head to overcome that head voice. And I actually have another video coming out about occlusion and the sound that we get when we plug our ears and we listen to our voice when we talk. It sounds muffled. And there's an EQ curve that you can apply to a microphone to overcome that occlusion effect slightly better. But in this case, I'm going to set them at +5 right now. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select this channel. I'm then going to tab over to my sends. I'm going to go to my Mixbus 1 and 2, which is the IEM 1. I'm going to go to layer 2, and I'm going to change this to be pre. And by changing this to pre, if I raise or lower the volume of this lead vocalist, it's going to change it in the rest of the band's ears, but not the lead vocalist's ears. We want to make sure that that's the same for that lead vocalist. Now, if you're not wanting to be actively mixing during a performance, you can leave this as post-fader, leave all of your channels at 0, and then if there's an issue with something, for instance, if there's some feedback, we can just go ahead and duck one of the channels all the way down to 0, and it will apply that same volume adjustment to all the band. So IEM 2 is going to be my vocalist 2, and he is playing the acoustic guitar. So I'm going to bump up the vocalist's mix and bump up his acoustic guitar. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my acoustic, and I'm going to change it in Mixbus 3 and 4 to be pre-fader. And again, on my vocal 2, I'm going to do the same thing on Mixbus 3 and 4, pre-fader. My in-ear 3 is going to be my vocal 3, and he is playing electric guitar 1. So I'm going to boost the electric guitar up a little bit louder than the rest of the band, and his vocal up as well. The next thing I'll do is go and select my electric guitar channel, and I will go to Mixbus 5 and 6 for my in-ear 3, and I will change this to pre-fader. And I will go to his vocal channel, and I will also set that to pre-fader. Now, in-ear 4 is going to be my vocalist 4, so we can go raise this up to his vocal, and they are playing the bass guitar. So I'm going to give some bass guitar and some more vocal, and I'll go to my bass guitar and change on my 7 and 8 mix bus to be pre-fader, as well as my vocal 4 to be pre-fader. And my very last in-ear mix is actually going to be the drums. So the drummer wants to have click track a lot louder than the rest of the kit, and he wants to hear his overheads louder than the rest of the kit as well. He also does not want to hear any vocals, so we are going to turn those all the way down to -30, which will place the vocals 20 dB less than the rest of the mix for his mix. So what I can then do is come out of Sends on Fader. And when I'm mixing here, I can create myself a mix. So what I'll do is I will turn up all of my channels to 0. And once sound check starts, I will go and adjust my preamp gain to get these levels at 0 to the point where it sounds good as a mix in my ears. So I will continue to adjust the preamp gain and leave all of these faders at 0. So I will go through and adjust all of these up to 0. And I will go and listen in as they're doing all the checks on every single microphone down the line through the drums and everything. And I will adjust the preamp gain up and down until I get an even mix that I like the sound of in my headphones. Now, I'm not soloing any of the mix buses here for my in-ears because I'm just listening to my left-right main. And because all of the sends from these channels to the in-ears is set as post-fader, if I go and adjust one of these volumes up or down, it's adjusting it for the entire band. Now, if the band is okay with you actively mixing their ears, if there's a guitar solo, you can simply go and turn it up, and it will turn up that electric guitar solo for the entire band so that they can hear that solo a little bit better. Or for instance, if there is a quieter section and you need to turn some stuff down, you can do that on all of these faders, and that will adjust for all of the band's individual sends, except those that are set to pre-fader. Now, say there is a problem with one of the channels, it starts crackling and popping, and we need to mute that. If you just simply mute one of them here, it will mute it for all of the band, because again, this is post-fader. Now, if you need to mix stuff in stereo for the band and start panning some things, what we can do is we can simply go and select our channel, and then we can pan using our second knob. So we can see that our odd knobs are for the levels, and our even knobs are for the panning. So for instance, if the lead vocalist wanted the other vocals panned in his mix, what we can do is we can go and select vocal 2, and that person is on the left side of them. We can go to vocal 3, that person's on the right, and then vocal 4 is on the hard right. So now we can see that these are panned in this vocalist's mix. Now, mixing post-fader for monitors is one of my favorite ways of mixing monitors. Now, there's a lot more that goes into mixing for a monitor engineer, and I have a bunch of more videos coming out in the next few weeks specifically on monitor engineering. Now, if you do happen to have any questions, make sure to put those in the comment section down below. And if there's a video that you're hoping that I will make on either anything to do with monitor mixing or any gear out there in general, please put those in the comment section down below, as I'm always looking through those comments to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, have a great day.